So who's ready to get this started? So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start the program. This year's theme grew directly from the daily realities we witness at our center. The landscape around us is shifting. Decisions are made faster, new pressures emerge, technologies evolve, and changing narratives about choice shapes women's experiences in profound ways. Each day, we welcome women through our purple doors who carry heavier questions than ever before. The most important decisions surrounding life, medicine, and conscience rarely happen in a classroom or a courtroom alone. They happen in moments of pressure, fear, and uncertainty. They happen at a woman's concern. That's why this panel matters so much. Together, they represent bioethics, law, pastoral care, three areas that regularly meet women right at those crossroads of life's hardest decisions. In preparation for tonight's event, we prepared several thought-provoking questions. However, please don't forget that after the formal panel, we'll move into the hot seat, where the audience will have the opportunity to ask questions. So come ready to think deeply, engage fully, and participate in the conversation. This evening, we are honored to be joined by Dr. John D. Camillo, president of the National Catholic Bioethics Center. He works at the intersection of medicine, ethics, and public policy, advising healthcare professionals, institutions, and families as they navigate complex moral questions involving life, dignity, and conscience. And we also welcome Judge Cheryl Allen. She brings decades of experience in the judicial system. Judge Allen offers a powerful perspective on how the law shapes culture, influences moral thinking, and affects society most vulnerable. Though now retired from the bench, she continues her work through the Pennsylvania Family Institute. And lastly, we have Father Stephen Logue. He is a licentiate in moral theology from the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas in Rome. He now serves as a priest at Sacred Heart here in Lancaster and teaches bioethics at Lancaster Catholic High School, where he helps students engage real-world ethical dilemmas in a rapidly changing culture with a deeply pastoral perspective. After hearing all that, it is obviously very clear who is the least intelligent and qualified to be on this stage. But please do not worry. My job is not to talk tonight, which is very rare. My job is to facilitate. And then my job always is to also steward for a woman's concern. I want to reach out very specially to the board of directors, to our sponsors, to the people that put the program together, and very especially the Knights of Columbus, who once again stepped up and helped us get a new ultrasound machine this summer. These steadfast supporters and friends, the people in the room like you, is what makes all the difference, so thank you. Now, before peppering our panelists with all the hard questions that we're so excited to have answers for, let's take a moment to put ourselves in her shoes, to remember why it's so important that our purple doors remain open and that we readily serve every woman who walks through those. This year's video is raw, it's honest, and it's deeply personal. It shares Chaley's journey that was often painful, uncertain, and far from the path any of us would hope for. It is a story of struggle, courage, and ultimately hope, the kind of hope that AWC exists to bring. Watch closely, and while you may feel the weight of her struggle, I hope you will also see the hope and strength that ultimately carried her forward.
I'll never forget, after she was placed on my chest, my mom looked at me and said, "I am so proud of you." And I had been waiting to hear those words for a really long time because it's been hard to be proud of me. I've never been proud of myself. I was just a really strong-willed, stubborn child that was seeking acceptance, and I found that in drugs. I first heard about AWC back in 2008. I became pregnant unexpectedly, and it was a really scary time. I had just turned 18. I was scared. The father of that child, I genuinely don't know who it was. I was in a really scary place in my life where I was very vulnerable. Ultimately, it was a bad time in my life, and I chose not to continue with that pregnancy. And then I had another situation in 2022. That time I was excited about my pregnancy. I think I was trying to ignore a lot of the factors around it. I was currently on drugs at that point. The father of my child was horrifically abusive and had tried to kill me twice and almost succeeded. So ultimately, I chose to end that pregnancy as well because I didn't feel like I would be safe. The thing that sticks out to me most about AWC is that when I came back this third time, they were excited to see me. They weren't like, why did you do that? They didn't hate me. They didn't judge me. They didn't demonize me. They were willing with open arms to help me as though it was the first time I'd been here. And that's how you help women, by making them feel heard and by making them feel understood. The first 2 times I was pregnant, I was definitely pressured to have an abortion, and that was a big factor in why I didn't tell anyone about my third pregnancy except a Woman's Concern. And it's not that my family wouldn't want to see me be a happy mother, but they had genuine concerns about my ability to do that. You know, I had proven in the past that I was not even able to take care of myself. But when I walked in here, it was like they remembered me from 2008 and from 2022. They remembered things that I'd said to them about my past pregnancies, about the way I felt about things. I felt like with AWC's help, I could do this. AWC really gave me a schedule. It gave me some stability. I had classes to go to. I had things to do. I had the social aspect of meeting other moms who were in the same situation as me sometimes. And it was just really nice to have that kind of community that I didn't have before. Vivian was born on 11/11/25, and for years, I've always looked at the clock at 11:11 at night, and I've made a wish. And my wish every single time is for peace in my life and happiness and to feel like I have purpose. And on 11/11 at 9:55 a.m., that wish came true. Vivian is the happiest little girl. 3 days ago, she picked up a toy for the first time and looked at it. She's interested in like rattles and stuff like that now. She's 3.5 months. My life has changed in every way possible. I wake up with purpose every day. I feel this love that I never imagined possible. And there have been times, you know, where it's been hard. I've had rough days, but then I look at Vivian and I'm like, how could I possibly do anything to put her in danger? It's not an option anymore. She anchored me to life. Without AWC, I do not think I would have continued this pregnancy. I felt like my entire pregnancy was celebrated here from start to finish. And I was able to get everything I needed. When I wake up in the morning and I walk over and her face just lights up because she sees her mommy. And it's so cool to be that person.
We don't always have clients willing to share that story as openly as Shaylee did. Her goal was that by sharing this story, she could help other mothers find the strength they need to find that hope. She wanted to use her story to give back. We are deeply grateful for her courage and the trust she's placed in us to share her journey tonight. And she's watched this video over 10 times and she cries every time. The strength that she's taken, the growth that she's had is just unbelievably remarkable. And I sit back as, you know, the director and I look at my team members and I know it's because of them. It's those personal relationships and it's those hearts that have made all the change. So as we reflect on her experience, we now turn to the panelists. From moral, legal, and medical perspectives, they will help us wrestle with the difficult questions her story raises and guide us through in understanding how we can respond with both compassion and with conviction for life. The video we just watched of Chaley's stories remind us that our clients' lives are often marked by trauma, abuse, and isolation, and are incredibly complex situations. We saw her decisions unfold through addiction, violence, and fear, yet ultimately she reached a turning point where she finally felt supported, informed, and free of pressure. So this brings us to our first question for the panel. And Father Loeb, we're going to start you off. How do we take personal circumstances into account while still upholding ethical standards of care and responsibility?
Thank you. I think something that has always been powerful to me in my study of moral theology, looking at it from a pastoral perspective and a theological perspective, is how the church takes these things into consideration in her understanding of any moral act. So first and foremost, I think it's not very helpful to conceive of sin when we talk about it in a theological context as something that we're just violating a rule in a cosmic game of Calvin ball where God is setting rules and we just have to know them or else we run afoul of him. It's not a helpful way to see it. I think a more helpful way is that sin is when we do something that causes harm to ourselves or to others, or to our relationships between us and others or ourselves and God. And particularly when we look in the church at what we would say is a serious sin, a mortal sin, there are certain criteria that need to be met in order to have that sin be as serious of an impact on us as it can be. And first and foremost, it has to be a serious matter. Can't be something trivial or something small, the action itself. Secondly, we have to have the freedom to choose it. We're freely choosing this, not being coerced into it or pressured into it. And third, we have to know that it's something that's wrong and choose it anyway. Those three elements, if any one of them is missing, it's not what we would consider a mortal sin. So if someone is coerced into a decision that they know is wrong, that is seriously wrong, but they're not freely choosing this act, it's not as serious as if they were freely choosing it. Likewise, if they don't have a good understanding. And I'll make one more distinction there that I think is helpful, and that's between vincible and invincible ignorance. That sometimes we don't know something is wrong, or we might say, well, I didn't know that was wrong, but really, you should have known that it was wrong. You don't have a good excuse. Parents out there probably get this from their kids from time to time. Yes, you knew this was what you were supposed to do. We call that vincible ignorance. There's not a good excuse for not knowing that. The other is invincible ignorance, when you don't know something is wrong, and it's reasonable that you didn't know that or didn't understand that. And there's one story that has always been kind of powerful to me in understanding this, and another element, and that's I heard from a missionary who would go out to these remote islands in the Pacific some years ago and minister to the people there. And when he started going to this island, he met an older gentleman who had grown up on the island, and this gentleman had been a young man, or maybe a boy, when the first missionaries came to the island to teach Christianity and proclaim the gospel. And he asked this older inhabitant of the island, "What's your perspective on the missionaries coming here? Are you happy they came? Are you sad? Like, what do you think about that?" And the old man said, "I'm very glad the missionaries came, because before they came, we didn't know that it was wrong to eat people." And it's kind of an extreme example, but this was a culture that, because of certain pressures that are understandable, the limited resources, growing population, for many generations, who knows how many generations, their culture had been telling them that, no, this is something that is acceptable. And it always strikes me because it reveals two things. One is I think, invincible ignorance, that they didn't have a way to know that that was wrong because of the pressures of the society that were on them. But secondly, the way that he put that, not you guys brought this different moral system that we appreciated more than the one that we had, and so we adopted it, but instead, no, there's something true to this statement, that it's wrong to eat people. And we didn't know that, and we wish we had known it, and we're glad that you were able to share that with us. And that speaks to the reality of a natural law, that there is something underneath something written in our hearts. Some of God's laws are revealed to us, but some of them are things that we know that we might need the help or the support or the guidance of others to recognize, not something being imposed on us from the outside, but something that our heart has been telling us all along.
As I was listening to the young lady talk, and one thing she said that really jumped out at me is when she said that she came to the Pregnancy Care Center, a woman's choice, and she felt that she was understood. And, you know, when I think about that and I think about my experience, especially my experience in juvenile court, when I dealt with thousands of women and men who were drug addicts and pregnancy and out of all kinds of issues. And I thought about the fact that I think that when we are talking to these young women and men, we have to approach them from the standpoint that, you know, we may not be suffering the precise same thing that they're suffering, but all of us have fallen. All of us are sinners. We all fall short. And I just think it's important for these women to understand that when they come in, you know, they're not talking to someone who just dropped in from heaven to help them, that they are talking to a person who's had some real life experiences. And I think that that can go so far. They need to understand we've all had our struggles, and then we need to be truthful with them. We need to speak the truth. Because one thing I know that in this movement, we're not here to win elections or win policies, or we're here to save babies and win souls. And so that's where it comes in. You know, I find that when I look back over my life and where I came from, and but for the grace of God, I would not be sitting here. And that's what I believe that is the most valuable thing that I can share with a young woman who is suffering and who is in trouble, so that she does not feel condemned, that she does not feel that she is less than. And when you can reach that common ground with someone, then you can go a long way to help them. And then at that point, as I said, sharing the truth, sharing the fact that, you know, abortion is permanent. Choosing life gives you many, many more options. And so, you know, that's the way I look at things. Just very, very plain, convey to people that they're not alone, and that they don't have to walk through this alone, and that they are not less than.
Thank you for these excellent responses. And I would add, in the work that I do at the National Catholic Bioethics Center, we have a free consultation service where we get calls and emails from about 1,600 people every year. And it's on the whole range of bioethics issues, from beginning of life to end of life issues and so forth. And having the privilege of those personal encounters with real people who have real questions about these kinds of challenging circumstances is a very humbling experience, and it's been a constant reminder for me, from going from the academic realm of the bioethics and, you know, the principles of double effect and so forth, you then take it down to a real human level. And the distinction that becomes immediately clear, both of the other panelists have mentioned already, but it's this distinction between the objective fact, the objective reality of what is done. In technical terms, we talk about the object of an act. And so that might be something that's bad, that's harmful to the person, to society, etc. And the act that's chosen is objectively bad. However, the subjective part, which means pertaining to the person, is that very piece that Father Loeb was mentioning about the knowledge, the understanding, and the deliberate consenting to this, which is frequently not there in these situations. In fact, we get so many phone calls, actually mostly from faithful Catholics, who are asking us for guidance on how do I understand and live out this teaching, right? So even people who are actively practicing their faith still have questions and don't quite understand how the teaching fits their circumstance. And so I found a large part of what I've had to do over the years is precisely acknowledging this distinction between, hey, you know, there's an objective reality of what may be the choice, and then there's the subjective piece of culpability. If you've already done it, are you culpable for it? And so I can't tell you how many calls and questions we've gotten from people who've been dealing with end-of-life questions, for example. They're like, hey, I actually don't have a question that needs an answer right now, but it's about something in the past. You know, when Mom was dying, we removed the nutrition and hydration. Was that wrong? And there's this lingering question, right? And so the first thing that I always do in those situations is say, hey, look, you're asking me a question about the past. So let's start from the premise that you did the best you could with the knowledge you had at that time, under the circumstances you were in, right? You have a question now. Maybe you read an article recently that made you question, was that the right thing? But you can't look backwards and apply the culpability from the past to something that you've now learned or questioned here and now. So that's definitely, you know, the key thing. How do we take account of personal circumstances while keeping ethical standards of care? We say, hey, the ethical standards are there. They're objective. They're not changing. But people's knowledge of those circumstances, people's knowledge of those facts, of those realities and those decisions does change. And it does impact their moral responsibility and their level of culpability. And we always have to take that into consideration so we can keep that person and their lived experience in the front, in the foremost place, encountering those people where they're coming from to try to equip them and arm them with the knowledge they need to move forward. Because now some of those people who may in the past have done something that was immoral that they did not realize, or that they were pressured to do, maybe they had a sense but they were under serious pressure. Well, now when they come back and they get the clarity and they get the understanding, and you're teaching them, yes, this is the truth. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, thank you. Thank you for telling me the truth. Because I was a little afraid that that's what it was, but that's what I needed to hear. And that's why I'm calling, that's why I want to find out the reality, because now I can tell other people. Now I can help other people avoid the same mistakes. So.
Thank you. Round two, guys, here we go. Since the overturning of Roe versus Wade, more pro-life laws have been enacted than at any other time in recent history. At the same time, it is not uncommon to see in news reports that they're blaming the pro-life laws for making it difficult for women to access reasonable and life-saving care. From your perspective, and this time, Judge Allen, we'll start with you, do legal restrictions or regulatory requirements ever stand in the way of physicians making the best decisions for their patients? And how should we thoughtfully balance law, medical judgment, and compassionate care?
I'll begin by answering absolutely not. There is no such conflict. First and foremost, there is not a single state in the United States of America where abortion is completely outlawed. There are states that have different time frames in mind. There are states that have 6-month or 6-week heartbeat bills, and there are states that are much more restrictive than others, but there are no states where abortion is completely outlawed. Now, the pro-abortion movement will tell you that abortion may be necessary to save a woman's life. There is no such thing as abortion being necessary to save a woman's life. Ending a pregnancy may be necessary to save a woman's life, but that does not mean that the baby has to be ended. And we have to keep in mind, because there's so much confusion that the abortion movement has purposely created in people's minds. So much confusion. During the 2024 election, we heard about two women, for example, in Atlanta who died, and the news media, they died because they couldn't get an abortion. The truth of the matter is they died because they did get an abortion. They took the abortion pill without medical supervision, and that's what happened. But the left wants to confuse people. For example, they will say that they will conflate abortion with a miscarriage. An abortion is the intentional killing of an unborn child. And it's never necessary. Now, I don't want to get into the ethical arguments of concerning rape and incest. I mean, I have my own personal views. I don't believe there's ever a reason to have an abortion, even in those instances. But we have a society where ever since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, there has just been an outrageous, aggressive effort to confuse people because they're not satisfied with Roe v. Wade did not eliminate abortion. Not at all. It just simply said that there is no constitutional right to an abortion pursuant to the United States Constitution. And since that time, many states, including Pennsylvania, are trying to enshrine the Constitution with abortion. Our Pennsylvania Constitution, for example. But there is no conflict. A doctor's responsibility is to do no harm and save life, using every means necessary. If a woman has a premature birth because it was necessary to end the pregnancy, then the doctor now has two patients, the mother and the baby. And every effort should be made to save the lives of both. It may not be possible given the circumstances, but that is what the medical profession has a responsibility to do. And there is never, as I said before, there is no such thing as a prohibition, as a doctor denying a woman treatment because of an abortion law. That is just a lie and a distortion of the abortion movement. And I'm saying abortion movement, not pro-choice movement, because they're really not about choice. They're only about abortion.
Yes, I would echo. So I would definitely echo the point about the confusion that's being deliberately created on this whole question of the law and the laws that impact abortion and proper care for women who may be experiencing complications of pregnancy. There's no question, almost every example that I've encountered in the media has been an exaggeration misrepresenting the actual realities on the ground in situations where, in fact, the cause of the woman's death may have been just poor medical management of a situation perhaps where antibiotics were not given at the right time or whatever the case is, and then it's blamed on the fact that abortion was not available. So I definitely want to echo that point, and I think there's no question that the pro-abortion movement is trying to capitalize as much as possible on this. I do have to say that my experience has been a little bit different, though, on the side of whether doctors can practice medicine with clarity in these areas of the distinction between what is an abortion versus what's a legitimate treatment of a mother's medical condition. So, which might result in the death of the child, to be clear. So there's certainly scenarios where we can intervene to help the mother and where that intervention might result in the death of the baby, and that can be morally legitimate. However, because the laws across the country, and we've been involved in consulting for a number of these situations for state Catholic conference directors and so forth, trying to essentially establish, now that Roe versus Wade was overturned, it's gone back to all the states, so every state's trying to clarify what are the laws on the books. And in many cases, the laws on the books went back to what might have been laws from the late 1800s, the early 1900s was the most recent version of a law on abortion that they had on the books. And so a lot of legislatures trying to pass new laws, and they're trying to define, well, how do we define what abortion is under the law in a way that will capture this fine distinction between legitimate medical interventions and direct abortions. Okay, so what we've encountered is there is confusion out there, is all I want to say. So there can be some confusion in medical practice. Now, I'll 110% say the pro-abortion movement is ramping that up dramatically, and they're taking any inconsistency that there might be or any perceived differences, and they're trying to play that up as if, oh my goodness, you know, doctors can't practice medicine anymore because they're going to be sued. And those are all exaggerations. But at least from my vantage point in the work that we do, most of our work is in navigating these fine distinctions and trying to help healthcare professionals and healthcare institutions and patients who have these questions to navigate those nuances. And we have encountered some confusion there, is my point, because of inconsistent definitions across the different states and what may be lingering concerns around potential malpractice if they don't follow the laws exactly the way they're written, or are we adequately capturing the valid distinctions for these situations? So I will just say to that particular point that there does remain a gray zone that needs some clarification. I think there will be ongoing discussions on this. And I've heard the same from obstetricians and gynecologists and physicians from around the country. Even pro-life OBGYNs don't all agree on exactly how you distinguish between that intentional direct abortion and legitimate medical interventions. So there's still some work that needs to be done there, even within the pro-life movement.
My fellow panelists are definitely better versed in the legal and the experience of doctors in that, but I would just add for the individual person out in the world who's hearing this dust and this confusion that's being kicked up, and it can be hard to sort through, I think a couple good points to keep in mind. Firstly, most of the Western world has stricter laws on abortion than we do, so, and they aren't experiencing these kind of problems, so clearly it can be done. But the second point to distinguish is that we can look at a law and say, okay, this law is being poorly implemented, and it's poorly understood, and it's not being handled very well on the ground. We could look at a law and say this law is poorly written, and that it's not achieving the ends that it's seeking to achieve. But neither of those things impact whether or not the law is poorly conceived. It could be a poorly conceived law that's written well and understood as it's written, but it's just a bad idea. It could be a great idea behind a law that's not written in a way that's the most helpful, or that's not being implemented in a way that's the most helpful. So even if these cases were true, and by and large they aren't, that doesn't get to the heart of, is this a good law to have on the books for our society?
Thank you very much, very much. So today, abortion pills are reported to account for about 63% of all abortions in the United States. At A Woman's Concern, if you asked our team, we would think it's approaching like 80%. So because their use has grown so significantly and access has expanded through mail delivery, because these medications are easily accessible and often without any medical oversight, serious ethical questions should arise on both sides of the issue, both the pro-life and, I'll take the pro-abortion debate. So ethically, what does true informed consent require in this context? So abortion pills are increasing, there's less medical oversight, and there's easy access through non-legal ways. So ethically, what does true informed consent require in this context?
So in this situation, actually, I think I'll just start from the basic point of what does informed consent generally require. And informed consent generally requires a basic understanding of the essential nature of the intervention, what is it, as well as the expected benefits and harms and risks, and any costs associated with it. That's just basic standard informed consent that you would expect even in a secular context. And so I think if we come to chemical abortion and we look at the fact that it's now being available through mail order. I mean, the first question that comes to my mind is, well, who's actually informing these women of any of those things, right? I mean, there's really not going to be good informed consent if you just hear, this is something I can buy online and get shipped to me. There's no medical professional who's going to be taking you through this. So that's something that, you know, the purportedly pro-choice side should want greater information made available so that women can actually make a choice if that's what they're arguing for. On the other hand, I would actually say first and foremost, for any kind of decision involving chemical abortion, you first have to understand who the child is in your womb, that you're dealing with a human life. And if you don't have that basic information, then how can you make any kind of reasonably informed decision above and beyond anything else? Like, you have to know, this is a living human being, this is my baby. And that's got to be a starting point for any true and proper informed consent. I'll actually take the opportunity here to mention an initiative I was privileged to be a part of, sort of helping with the ethical analysis side. There's, within the pro-life movement, I think, a great awareness of the fact that chemical abortion is spreading, as we're hearing here, and it's really become the predominant form of abortion, sadly. And in order to respond to this, right, we had the ultrasound movement. I just heard that great news about the Knights of Columbus funding an ultrasound machine. That's wonderful, which has been a huge help in helping people to realize and understand the humanity of the child in the womb. And with chemical abortion, there are now some conversations happening in pro-life circles on how can we help women better understand and respond to fight this chemical abortion push. And one of the proposals out there has been to essentially adapt miscarriage kits to provide them as an educational tool for women who may be considering chemical abortion or may be already abortion determined, and essentially try to give them basic medical information about what happens when a child is expelled in early pregnancy, which is effectively what's going to happen with a chemical abortion, and to try to provide additional, again, medical information about what kind of harms and dangers there are going to be to the woman's body, what she's going to go through, how, you know, there might be blood loss and these other sorts of things. The idea behind it all being, how can we now find a way to make more real for the woman the reality of pregnancy loss, the reality of losing the child, and the reality then of seeing what does a child look like at different gestational ages as part of basic scientific information for an early pregnancy loss or chemical abortion situation. So anyway, I think that that's the sort of information that can help for true informed consent is, again, helping the woman to understand the reality of the baby in the womb, the medical risks and harms, what actually happens with a chemical abortion, what is that experience going to be like if you proceed with this choice?
I think it's important, first of all, for women to understand, and just if I could just do a little bit of background on chemical abortions, because they first became a part, where the FDA first approved them in the United States in 2000 at the end of the Clinton administration. And at that time, they had a 4-part procedure. The woman had to undergo a sonogram to make sure she was pregnant, to make sure that she wasn't more than 11 weeks pregnant, and that she didn't have any other complications, medical complications. Then the first pill would be administered under medical supervision, and that's the pill that basically kills the unborn child, and then the second pill would be given within 24 to 48 hours to cause the contractions. And then there would be a follow-up exam to make sure that there were no tissues left in the woman's body. Well, around the late teens, I think it was around 2018, I'm not sure, around that time, the ACLU and a number of other left-wing organizations filed a lawsuit. They said that this pill is as safe as Tylenol, and so it's really not fair to put women through the trauma or the burden of having to go into a clinic. And then COVID came along, and they used COVID as a justification for not requiring women to go into a clinic. And so the FDA has removed all of the safeguards. A group of pro-life doctors filed a lawsuit The case went up to the United States Supreme Court. The court declined to rule on the merits because they said that the doctors did not have standing. And it's my understanding that that case is on its way back up to the Supreme Court. Now, of course, all of this has happened and exploded in our society because of these more restrictive abortion laws from state to state. So this is a way to get around those laws, to go into states where abortion laws are more restrictive, to reach into people's homes, and the mainstream drugstores, Walgreens, CVS, et cetera, are all trained to fill these prescriptions. And they are sent in the mail. And of course, to the young college student or the young high school student, this looks like an easy solution, something that I can do without anybody finding out, not realizing, of course, the danger involved. And I take the position, and I've spoken in front of church congregations, and I've basically said, yes, we have to teach our young people sexual responsibility and morals and those things, but we also have to understand that some children are going to mess up, and we have to create an atmosphere where they believe and understand that they can come to us as parents and as theologians and not go to an abortion clinic, and that we will help them walk through this, because otherwise people are going to die. Informed consent should include full information as to just what can happen when a young person or any woman takes these pills without medical supervision. But we live in a society where the goal is abortion. And abortion, again, is the intentional, it's one of intent, the intentional killing of an unborn, ending a pregnancy through the intentional killing of an unborn child. And there's never a medical reason for it, only a reason of convenience. And so I think we have to go a long way in educating and preparing and equipping young people by telling them the truth and by creating an environment where they don't feel judged, where they feel that there's someone that they can go to other than Planned Parenthood. So.
In many ways, I think this scenario now with these chemical abortions available in the mail is a lot closer to the sort of doomsday scenario often proposed by pro-abortion advocates of what would happen if we had outlawed abortion, that there would be these back alley abortions. Well, now it's private bathroom abortions with many of the same risks. I think in thinking about this dilemma, an analogy came to mind, bear with me. It reminded me of at our church right now, our altar server robes, the robes that our servers wear at Mass, are in a sorry state. They're falling apart, they're way too old. And someone lamented recently that our servers aren't doing a good job of putting those robes back on the hangers and putting them where they belong. They're middle schoolers and high schoolers. It's somewhat to be expected. But it dawned on me that part of the reason why I think they're not taking as good care of the robes as we might want them to is that the very fact that we're having them wear ratty old robes is us implicitly communicating to them that these things are not important. And I think abortion pills in the mail is, as a society, we're communicating to these women that this decision is not important and it's not a big decision. And that implicit message is, I think, deafening for these women. And so we need to find ways to help them understand that, no, this is an important decision. This isn't as simple as, isn't simpler than taking antibiotics, which is the way it is in their lived experience right now.
Thank you. Thank you. So as we get ready for the hot seat, people who would like to have a question, please just come right up here and we'll be able to accommodate you. I would like to share that these are real scenarios that happen at our center every day. Just this week, a young girl came in. Well, she has been with us for 2 weeks working on her decision, and she's seen life, and she's still struggling. And she shared that if you go to Aid Access, you can get abortion pills for $150. And then she found out but her friend had some because she already ordered them, and her friend would give them to her for $100. So these scenarios exist in our day-to-day life at A Woman's Concern, and it's traumatic. It's very upsetting. So I appreciate all your comments very, very much. Okay, so here we go. We have our first question.
Oh, she went that way.
We'll have them come up here. You guys, could you please line up here? Marianne will take care of you, and then you can come up.
Thank you guys so much for being here. I'm Charlotte Albertini. I'm a junior from Lancaster Catholic. And my question is, what is the strongest argument you have heard for abortion, and how did you respond?
You said the strongest argument for abortion?
Yes. What's the strongest argument that you have?
Well, there are no strong arguments in my mind, but I can tell you, especially as a black woman, very often in the black community and in some lower income communities, often the argument is, there are other issues other than abortion. Poverty is a life issue. Lack of health care is a life issue. And all you pro-life people care about is abortion, but you don't care about these life issues that people are facing on a regular basis. And my response to that is always, before you can have a life issue, you have to have a life. And so, you don't address poverty, and you don't address, you can't eliminate poverty or eliminate some of these other issues by eliminating people. And that's what the left would tell you. And I guess the other common argument that is put forward is that maternal health, maternal mortality is a major issue. In other words, there's this tendency to treat pregnancy as though it is the illness that needs to be, and that abortion is the solution to solving this illness. And it's really a sick way of looking at things, because yes, in some communities, maternal mortality is an issue, but you take the necessary steps to provide the health care that people need, rather than eliminating the baby. So.
I think some of the strong arguments rhetorically in terms of convincing people is arguments appealing to some of the extremes. So rape and incest or extreme poverty. And I think a good response to those sorts of arguments is to say, okay, would you compromise and have abortion outlawed in the non-extreme instances and only permitted in the extreme instances that you mention? And in most cases, the person will say, no, I don't want that compromise. And you can say, okay, then our disagreement isn't about the extremes, it's about the issue itself. And that's where we should be talking, because we're never going to agree on the extremes if we don't first agree on the basic principles that we're talking about.
Yeah, I was actually going to say the same, well, not as eloquently as Father, of course. No.
Glad I went second.
I really do think the question of abortion as medically necessary to save the life of the mother, for me, and of course, maybe it's more that I just deal with that so much more in my work, but that is a very, very, very powerful argument, because you're putting the most fundamental value, life, against the most fundamental value, which is life, right? The life of the baby and the life of the mother. I know that I guess the way I would respond to it relatively short terms. I alluded to it before. I mean, there's a lot of complexity around this issue, and I do think even within pro-life circles, it's not as clear-cut as we might wish it would be. However, that being said, I think the response is very much along the lines of what Father Logue was suggesting. In other words, when you say something like, oh, well, abortion's medically necessary, all you have to do first is say, okay, well, wait a minute, what do you mean by medically necessary? And then it turns out you're including all sorts of things that aren't really so necessary, like the psychological well-being of the mother, or, you know, like there's a minor medical condition that's just a threat to, you know, health that could be adjusted. If we really cared about saving both lives, actually you could resolve the vast majority of every potentially contentious issue. And I've seen and experienced that firsthand. You know, where almost every single complicated maternal case that I've ever encountered is resolvable by actually having the will to save both the mother and the baby. And so whatever debates may be left around when an abortion might be the only possible solution to save the mother's life, whatever debates might be left around that, that is such a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of all the cases out there that really it's not even something you can legislate for. You're trying to deal with the extreme case of extremely rare scenarios that almost never occur in reality in a way that can't be handled through proper care of both mother and baby. And so anyway, that would be the long story short. I think you need to just focus on, well, what's the substance of this? The substance of this is that we can address the vast majority, well over 99% of every situation where abortion is ever being contemplated without even having to answer that question.
We have a Planned Parenthood at Manor and Pearl Street, right here in our county, which is about a block from A Woman's Concern. So when vigiling outside of Planned Parenthood, unlike being at a pregnancy resource center where we have 45 minutes to an hour with a client, we have 15 to 30 seconds. We cannot go into the parking lot. She gets out of her car, an escort from Planned Parenthood meets her, and we can then say whatever the Holy Spirit leads. What would you suggest? There seem to be two schools of thought. One of them is that you say to her, you might even sort of be aggressive and say, your baby has 10 fingers and 10 toes. Don't kill your baby. The other school of thought is try in the 15 to 30 seconds to get her to understand that you care about her because she holds the power. What would you suggest we do in the 15 to 30 seconds that we have?
I think you answered your own question. That you let her know that you care about her. And I understand, you know, the 15 to 30 seconds because we do have this FACE Act that they are so determined to enforce. But again, I believe that it's necessary to let these women know that we care about you and we want to help you. And as you well know, very often the pro-abortion movement spreads the message that we only care about that baby, the unborn baby, not even the baby after it's born, which is of course not true. But I think we have to show our love toward that mother and reach out and offer a hand to her.
So I'm a mother of 3, 4 on the way, and I've had 3 miscarriages. And my first one was an emergency D&C, so the medically necessary abortion that you're talking about, they do label it as an abortion. My question is on my medical records, they have labeled not just that D&C abortion miscarriage as a medically necessary abortion, but all 3 of my miscarriages on my medical records. Is there anything I can do medically or morally or legally to change that? Because as a pro-life woman, seeing that on my medical records is disheartening, and I feel like it makes an argument to the pro-choice that my miscarriages, my babies lost, were medically necessary.
So, yes, so basically well, thank you for your question. Thank you very much for your question, and I'm very sorry for your losses. It is important to clarify the medical terminology, and I know that that's very traumatic to see the word abortion. And this actually does get to one of the fundamental issues that we have to deal with all the time in my work, which is distinguishing carefully our terminology. And it is the case that the medical reality, the term abortion, is not specific to what we term direct abortion in moral terms. So abortion in medical terms, you can have a spontaneous abortion is the medical term for a miscarriage. It does not imply any intentionality. That's why it's spontaneous. And so the term abortion in medical terms is actually neutral. It would be an induced abortion, or it would be a DNC abortion, or there would be other terminology that would indicate that this was either an elective termination or some intentional killing of the child. So I know it's not helpful, and I think the short answer is there's not really a way to change it legally in your paperwork. I mean, you might be able to ask that a note be put in your medical record, but I doubt that they would change the terminology. This stuff also is actually all bound up in the medical billing and coding system too, which is one of the areas that we work with in my work. We help Catholic employers to make sure their health benefits don't include immoral procedures like abortions. And so we get down to the level of looking at all of the diagnosis and procedure codes, which is a sort of universalized system that's used throughout the country. And they use this very terminology of spontaneous abortion, missed abortion. So the term missed abortion actually medically refers to a scenario where the child actually dies in utero, but has not been expelled. And so that's called a missed abortion, where the term abortion is simply referring to the expulsion, but has nothing to do with intentionality. So I know it's not comforting. You probably won't be able to change the record, but it doesn't mean anything with respect to any bad or immoral action or a direct abortion.
And I think we can be intentional somewhat in our terms, not in every circumstance, but in trying to use more terms like direct abortion to make sure that we're distinguishing as well.
My name is Tim Boley. I'm a maternal fetal medicine physician, a pro-life maternal fetal medicine physician. I practiced at Women and Babies for 7 or 8 years. And now I live in Virginia. I'm retired. I'm involved heavily with American Association of Pro-Life OBGYN Doctors. And you've already mentioned Virginia has, on the ballot in November, will be one of these horrendous laws put out by our legislatures to put the abortion amendment in our Constitution. And it's awful. And this is great, because I think one of the problems we have in Virginia and here is educating people. And even though we have a great group of people who are pro-life, but you may end up, when you get to the ballot, look at the thing and say, well, that doesn't sound so bad, because what the questions are on the ballot really don't pertain to what's in the amendment. They just basically say, wouldn't it be great if we had fundamental right for reproductive freedom? Well, yeah, who doesn't want freedom? And then, but from there, it goes downhill. So if you look at it, if you never read the amendment, and I'm sure that, I don't know where Pennsylvania stands right now in their amendment, but if it's been passed and will be on the ballot, then it's going to be, if it's anything like Virginia's, it's going to be awful, and it's going to sound nice. But I appreciate what you're doing here, educating, and I think, don't just go in there without looking at it, reading what it really says, because the amendments, wherever they try to pass these they're written by Planned Parenthood, basically, I think in most cases, and their goal is to increase abortion, period. No matter how much, how much you make it look like what is it, silk purse out of a cow's ear. I mean, that's what it's all about. But my question I had, I mean, other than to say that you're doing a great job, and I appreciate you coming here because these are things that we need to teach everybody that, before they vote in these situations, is you hear the word or this, people, what about women's autonomy? And you said that, somebody said autonomy here tonight, but, I think that people get confused about words, and I'm glad you talked about the definition of abortion. APLOG, or American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs, on their website, they have a whole guide. They have a list of what should be realistic definitions. And when people hear abortion, it means 100 different things to different people. And, and I appreciate saying that there is no law in any state that will prevent a doctor from saving a pregnant woman's life. I learned that in my fellowship that a woman, we have 2 patients. Mom is our first patient. That doesn't mean we're willing to kill the baby. If the baby dies in trying to save the mother's life, that's not an abortion. And I think that's clear, and I don't think everybody knows that. But anyway, and the other thing is, just life. When somebody says, well, what's more important, mother's life or baby's life? Well, the baby's life is life or death. The mother's life is, can she go to college? Or can she get a better job if she doesn't have a baby? So, I mean, any thoughts about how if somebody asks us, well, mom's autonomy is important, shouldn't she be able to decide, it's my body, I can do what I want to with it? What would your responses be in that regard?
Well, I mean, it is her body, and she technically can do what she wants with it. However, when she gets pregnant, we're talking about somebody else's body. And, I believe in reproductive freedom. I really do. But the time to exercise reproductive freedom is before you reproduce. Once you've gotten pregnant, you've reproduced, and you have not and that's it. I mean, it's not your body, it's someone else's body. And, we have people in the United States who, through Roe v. Wade and other case law and constitutional amendments, who believe that a woman has a right to an abortion. And there is not now, and there has never been a right to kill anybody. Even in our United States Constitution, it doesn't address abortion, but it does address the question of life. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that is endowed by our Creator. With regard to the abortion amendment, in Pennsylvania, just before Christmas, the Pennsylvania House introduced a proposed amendment to the Pennsylvania Constitution that would protect and guarantee the right to an abortion. And we've made it very clear that they're doing this and they're seeking abortion up to 40 weeks. Now, they will tell you that there's nothing in the language that mentions 40 weeks, which is part of the problem, because if you don't mention a time, that means a time period, that means there is none. And so this legislation was introduced in the House. It passed by 1 vote. Under Pennsylvania law, it would have to go to the Senate and pass, then it would have to go back and pass a second time in the House and a second time in the Senate. And if it passes 2 legislative sessions, then it would go on the ballot for the public to vote on. Now, I don't believe that it's going to make it through the Senate, as the Senate is presently constructed, but we cannot rest on our laurels. We have to be very vocal. And I will say the Democrats have a 1-vote majority in the House. There were 2 Republican House members who voted for this amendment, There were 2 Democrats who voted against it, and because they have that 1 vote majority, it passed by 1 vote. So we have a lot of work to do. We cannot rest on our laurels.
Do either one of you want to address that, or should we go to the next question? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, got it. I happen to live in Virginia, and we've elected a couple governors that are real, real winners when it comes to making some unbelievable decisions. My question is for you, Your Honor, because it's really more from a legal perspective. One of the things that, we hear the argument being made when it comes to choice, and a lot of the discussion has kind of framed around this as far as the convenience aspect of a woman choosing to procure an abortion. The thing that I don't think is talked about enough is the fact that women choose that because they don't feel like they don't have any other options. Now, a woman's concern is very good at educating the fathers and doing a lot for them to live up to their responsibilities for being a father to that child. That's great for those men who come voluntarily seeking that. The problem is I hear too many stories of single women who have children and the father either completely disappearing once and having established that person as being the father, not there being any question. But then you hear where this woman had to raise that child by herself, and the father, who may have had the means to support the child, chose not to. And what's the? Are we merely? What's the solution as far as judges holding these men accountable for the fact that they have this child and making them live up to their responsibilities and making, quite frankly, enforcing tough penalties for those who choose not to do that? Are we merely held hostage to the political winds on this, or is there something that can be done?
Well, there are I believe some very strong laws in place that hold fathers accountable. For example, if a woman gives birth to a child and seeks any kind of public assistance for the support of that child, the state will require her to identify the father, and that father will be pursued for child support. Paternity tests will be ordered if the man is denying paternity. Once a support order is entered, employers can be contacted, wages are attached. Even if he gets a tax return, that will be garnished. So there are a lot of good measures in place, and really it's up to the woman, if she's not on assistance, to pursue that through the court system. I think the courts, for the most part, at least in Allegheny County, are very, very good about going after that father and holding him accountable. And even if this is a man who lives in California, say, and the mother's in Pennsylvania, there is a legal mechanism where he can be pursued in California without her having to travel there. And so the laws are there for the woman to take advantage of. So I mean, that's my experience in the family court. But yes, Virginia has some very, very liberal abortion laws. They're attempting to do the same thing in Pennsylvania.
I would just add, in the context of fathers, one of the biggest blessings as a priest is to be a spiritual father. And I think something that especially the men in our community can do is to be attentive to the people, the young people that maybe God has put in your life, that you're called to be to some degree, a spiritual father to. And that might be a support to them that we won't even understand this side of eternity.
I would like to share just really quickly at A Woman's Concern, when Mike joined our team now over 5 years ago, all of our numbers have gone up exponentially because we've invited him in. So the men, the other side has said that you men just kind of, let's get some tape and cover your mouths. You are not invited into these conversations. And what we have found, I think, phenomenally well is that when we've invited them in, they've been saying yes. They've been saying yes, and they've accepted our help, and you guys, more lives are saved so significantly when the men are involved. So I'm a data girl. Data proves men involved, more lives saved, and happier families.
You say that as you take Dr. DiCamilo's microphone.
There is already there.
Hello, my name is Peter Chickarine. I'm not even sure I have a question, but I have an experience. I've been in the hotel business for 53 years. And during those 53 years, I've probably worked with 5,000 or 6,000 or 7,000 people. And my first abortion experience was in 1976. And a secretary that worked for me, 22 years old, had an unexpected pregnancy and conveniently made the decision to have an abortion. My last experience was about a month ago, a similar situation. And what I find it's so distressing is that what we're talking about this evening seems to be so far above what I experience in a conversation. The first thing that most people say is, it's not convenient. The second thing they say is, it's way too expensive, and who will even help me? And it's very difficult to be in a situation where you're actually supervising people, you're working with people on a daily basis, and you really might not, I don't have an answer all the time, and it becomes very difficult. So I guess my question is, how do I deal with that? How can I be more helpful to the people that I work with every day, and to keep something in perspective in some sense of what we do? That's my question. Thank you.
I guess I would respond by saying, first and foremost, that's why we need to support pregnancy care centers, because they are there to help these women. And I also believe that that is an area for the church to really step up to the plate and provide the necessary support for these, because most abortions are purely elective. The media would tell you, well, they want to play up the extreme cases like the rapes or the incest or people with extreme medical conditions. But most abortions are elective. And most abortions really are performed because a woman or young girl doesn't believe that it's a convenient time to have a baby. Or maybe there are economic issues. So I think that that's where the church, that's where should support these women emotionally. That's where they should support pregnancy care centers. And just, rather than judge these women, extend a helping hand to them. And that's what's needed.
I think maybe if the person is saying, no one will support me, no one will help me with this, maybe a simple question, if you have the relationship for it, is to say, have you asked if they would help you? And I would bet a lot of them haven't asked. And that might be an encouragement for them to ask the people in their lives, would you support me if I chose life? And if they have asked and haven't gotten that help, then having some resources like A Woman's Concern to say that there are people out there who will help you. I'm sorry none in your life are willing to do that.
And another way, just by way of example, an inspiration by how you live your life and how you talk about life and pregnancy and these sorts of things. It comes to mind an experience I had many years ago when I was actually I was just studying bioethics at the time, and I had been back home visiting with my mother. I went with my mom to the flower shop our local flower shop where she usually goes just to help her pick up some flowers. And there was a young lady at the counter there who was, selling the flowers. And so we just got to chatting because my mom likes to chat. And so I was talking about my work, I was talking about bioethics, started talking about, I was dating my wife at the time, and I was like, oh, we're going to be married soon. I'm so excited, looking forward to, family life, and, just talking about life and just being excited about children and about life. And it turns out later, after I left, we got the flowers, and then like 2 weeks later, my mom calls me, and she's like, do you know that the girl at the flower shop was pregnant, and she was planning to have an abortion, and she decided that she would keep the baby after she talked to you? And I was like, I had no idea.
Thank you, panel. I just wanted to ask, was there anything else that a question was not asked for that you definitely wanted to share tonight? Was there anything else you wanted to share? Well, then I'm going to be very indulgent, and I'm going to ask you one final question, and I'm going to ask the panel, why should you in the crowd possibly support a woman's concern?
Well, because you've got an amazing support system here for all the people in pregnancy situations, husbands, fathers of the children, mothers, and it's so important to have that personal, on-the-ground encounter with these people and to help all of those mothers and fathers to love and to care for their children. And so these kinds of women's concern, the work that you do is just so important for that.
As I said towards the beginning, when we understand a moral action and a serious moral action is what the act is, whether or not there's full knowledge and whether or not there's full consent, I think something that a woman's concern has always done really well and has paid careful attention to is understanding for each and every person who walks through the door, what is the decisions that they're facing, what is their knowledge of those decisions, and how freely are they able to contemplate those decisions. And that's not something that happens as often as it should in medical circumstances and certainly in the area of abortion.
And I would just say that people should support a woman's concern because they are actually the last stop for many of these women. They are in a stage, in a position in their lives where they're desperate and lonely, and they may feel that there are no other options for them. And so to just have someone who is not going to judge you, who is not going to look down on you, but who is going to extend a helping hand, who is going to help to not only affirm you in choosing life, it's going to help your partner, your hopefully soon-to-be husband, and it's going to help your baby. And unlike what the left says, I know that a woman concerned and many of these other pregnancy care centers really do provide support for these babies beyond birth. And they are actively involved in supporting these families, helping them to get job training, helping them to get education, helping them to develop the skills that they need not only to learn how to take care of a baby, but also helping them in terms of their human relationships and family relationships, and it's just so important.
How about that for an incredible panel? My prayer for all of us tonight is that we walk away with a few more of those nuggets of truth, a little bit more confidence that we can share these conversations. Satan loves that we don't allow conversations around life to exist. The other side has stolen that word and turned it into something dirty. It is our obligation, and I believe moral obligation, to start sharing more, loving more compassionately, and making sure we're there for her. And do not be afraid to share these conversations with love and compassion. So your support tonight helps ensure that when a woman walks through our purple doors next week, when she's afraid, she's uncertain, and she's searching for answers, she will be met with medical care, honest information, and a community ready to stand beside her. Please know that you're not simply donating. You're helping change the balance. One woman, one child, and one family at a time. And for that, we are incredibly grateful. Since this work ultimately belongs to God, it only feels right that we continue to place these decisions and this ministry in His hands. Before I give you the specifics on how to give, I would like to introduce Monsignor Hahn to the stage, and I also want to thank St. Leo's for their incredible welcome for us tonight.
Jill, thank you for your great work, and it's a joy to welcome all of you here, and we thank you for your presence. And so let us pray in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Dear God, our infinite loving Father, we thank you for every blessing that you give to us. The first, of course, is the gift of faith of all of us and our loved ones. And then as we gather in this Easter season, the gift of new life, won for us in the passion, death, and resurrection of Christ, your Son. We thank you for the work of A Woman's Concern. We ask you to bless it so that many lives may be saved and lives touched. And we ask you to bless all that are here, the benefactors, that you may open their hearts so that they generously give, so that A Woman's Concern may continue to flourish and to build up your kingdom here on earth. Until that day, we pray all of us enjoy your life and love in the eternal glory of heaven. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. So we decided to try to make this incredibly easy for everybody. If you go ahead and you look at the purple bag on your table, you can, there's forms in there that you can fill in. There's also an online QR code on your table. There's a little table tent. You can go ahead and place those envelopes back in the purple bag for our team to collect. There are team members also stationed at the parish hall exit to help with credit card information if you need help, but that QR code should make it easy for you. On behalf of the board, the team, and the volunteers at A Woman's Concern, please accept our incredible gratitude that you've given us the honor and the privilege to serve on the front lines every day. God bless, and thank you very much for joining us tonight.